my name is Beck and welcome to the second Are They Worth It video. This is a video series that I created so that I can talk about 3 different books all at the same time and I can convince you whether or not they're worthwhile reading. Please excuse in the background, there is a neighbour that is drilling on and off, so hopefully I can kind of talk in between their drilling. We'll see how we go. The first book that I want to talk about in this video is of course Harry Potter. This is a book that I feel like a lot of people, especially in my generation, latched onto and absolutely loved, and it really forged their love of reading because that is very true of me. So Harry Potter, obviously a lot of people know about it if you haven't read it yet before. It's about a boy named Harry. He is an orphan boy and he's living with his aunt and uncle and his younger cousin Dudley as well, and they very much bully him. It's quite an abusive situation that Harry is in, and when he turns 11 years old he gets a visit from a wizard named Hagrid, and Hagrid says, "Harry, you're a wizard. There is a magical school called Hogwarts. You're going to come here for most of the year and learn magic." And so when he goes to this magical school, it's like a portal fantasy, so he goes through a train station onto the Hogwarts Express and then goes to Hogwarts, and a lot of magic ensues. There is a dark one who is Harry's foe in this, like the antagonist. Harry, who is obviously the hero, the protagonist, kind of like the unwilling hero. He doesn't want this power, he doesn't want this fame or attention, but he gets it anyway and he has to deal with it. There is also a prophecy at the center of this as well, and that comes to light more so throughout the series as you read through. And when I read it as a kid, it was read to me and then I picked it up and read it myself. I absolutely loved it and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the world, the magic, all of the characters, and this very much links into the core tropes of fantasy, which is probably why I latched on so easily, and that is when there is a hero, when there's a villain, and when there is like a magical school or a magical place to go to, especially one that's urban fantasy like Harry Potter. You can easily go through a doorway and then appear in a magical world, which I found amazing as a concept. Similarly, another key trope in this is the chosen one trope, and that is a trope that is very widespread across fantasy. Often you will find it whenever you go into a bookstore and just randomly pick something up. It's quite common. There has been subversions on that and I'll talk about one of those later, but the chosen one is essentially when there is a character who has some prophecy or some magic associated with them, who has some kind of greater destiny, and that comes to a head over the series. So Harry Potter is the chosen one in his story. There is also another chosen one that I'd like to talk about, and that is a character in The Eye of the World, which is the first Wheel of Time book. Now, this is a very popular series as well, but it seems to be a very old school popular fantasy series. It's one that my dad's really into. It's one that people seem to be into on forums online already, and they've read them when they were growing up. I just happened to miss the boat on this one, unfortunately, but I've since read the first 2 books in this like 15 or 14 book series, and one of my favorite authors actually finished the series, so that made me want to pick it up and start it in general. But The Wheel of Time is a quintessential fantasy book in that it's got that chosen one, but it's also doing interesting things with that trope. So when the story opens up, we are in this little farm town and there is Rand and his best friends Matt and Perrin, and for some reason they are trying to be tracked down by this dark one, this dark force. And this is about magic that was split off into male and female a long time ago. Magic has really died out. There aren't really any male heroes left. There are only a group of women that have kept the secrets of magic close to them. And so we have one of these witches named Moraine, and she comes to this backwater town as well. There is a festival going on at this backwater town at the same time. It attracts all of these creatures. So we don't really know who the chosen one is. We just know that it's Matt, Perrin or Rand because they are all brought along on a quest with Moraine. So again, it really knits together that trio kind of vibe. Like in Harry Potter, there's Harry, Ron and Hermione. In Eye of the World, there is Matt, Perrin and Rand all together, and they go on a journey together. So it has that quest trope, which again Harry Potter has a little bit later into the series. For the most part it's set at the magical school to begin with. In this one there is a magical academy at some point, and that is where all the Aes Sedai, which are like the witches, go to study and learn how to use magic and use different forms of magic. So there is a magical school in there at some point, but it's just discussed at the beginning. And so the first book really focuses on a quest, and that's one of the reasons I really enjoyed it, because there was a big journey. There was also character growth with that journey, and the way that Robert Jordan wrote his work. The beginning was quite slow. The first 70 to 100 pages was a lot of setup and understanding the environment and understanding Rand and the town and the different mechanisms of that. But after that, the inciting action happens, which is when something happens that is not familiar and it really pushes the character out of their comfort zone. That happened about 70 to 100 pages in, and it really pushed Rand into something new and dangerous. And so that's where all of the action started. And after that, I just devoured the book, and I gave Harry Potter about a 4 or 5 stars. I gave Eye of the World a 4 stars. It was really enjoyable. And in terms of writing and just characterization, I found it very interesting as well. The pace was a bit up and down for me. It got very slow at the beginning and it got very quickly wrapped up at the end. It felt a little bit too quick for me personally, but I still enjoyed the time to get there. So I would say, are Harry Potter and the Eye of the World worth it? Honestly, I would say yes, give it a try. If you are new into fantasy, I think you would enjoy Eye of the World more, because me going back and reading it and trying this series now, I found my tastes have very much developed and already leaped off that initial foundation. So I did enjoy the first book. I didn't really love the second. So The Wheel of Time might not be a series for me, but it is a series that has a lot of fans, so I don't want to discourage you from reading it in case it becomes a new favorite of yours, because everyone likes different kinds of writing styles. Personally, I think the first book is fairly easy to get into, and it introduces you to a whole host of characters that are quite significant. So from that standpoint and from the pace and the world building, I think it's worthwhile. For Harry Potter, I think it's immediate. You get characterization straight away with Harry, whereas in Wheel of Time, there are multiple characters to keep track of. In Harry Potter, it's just from his perspective, so it's easier to keep track of him. So I guess Harry Potter I would recommend and say, is it worth it? Yes. But at the same time, I know J.K. Rowling isn't a very good role model. She's somebody who talks against LGBTQIA+ people and communities in general. She's not a person of support, so I'd rather say don't support her. But also, if your reading tastes go down the road of Harry Potter, I think it's a beautiful series that is very magical and fun in itself, and it has dark and interesting aspects too. So read it if you would like to read it. Personally, I would say it was worth my reading time because it really pushed me into loving fantasy and urban fantasy, but it's not something I'm entirely comfortable recommending and entirely comfortable going back and rereading, because I feel like as soon as I reread it, I'm going to envision all the problems with it, and I don't want to mar what my childhood was. So is Harry Potter worth it? Yes or no, depending. Is Eye of the World worth it? Yes or no, depending. Again, it was worth it to me for the first book, not so much the second. And I think for any foundational reader looking to get into fantasy, I'd say go for it, because even though it looks long and scary, it's actually quite easy to get through because of the kind of writing that it is. And so now this last book that I want to talk about, it takes the chosen one trope, which is prevalent in Harry Potter and Eye of the World, and it subverts that a little bit. So Brandon Sanderson wrote The Final Empire, which is the first book in the Mistborn series. It can be read as a standalone because it has a lot of story ends that really wrap up and it feels conclusive. But at the same time, if you want something a little bit longer, if you're a little bit braver, you can go into Mistborn, the first book, and it's a trilogy that's complete. So it is worthwhile your read. Again, like Wheel of Time and Harry Potter, the writing is very easy to get into. It's very simplified in the sense of you read it and you feel like you're getting through it very quickly, not you read it and you feel like there's flowery prose. We've been describing the forest for 6 pages. It's nothing like that. You get through it very quickly, and I like Brandon Sanderson's writing for that reason. So Mistborn follows Vin, and she's a street urchin, so she's trying to survive on the street, not doing an entirely good job, and at the same time she's trying to survive in this city. There is a Dark Lord who years ago he basically defeated the hero and took power for himself, and so now he's the one who rules over Mistborn. The mist comes at night time, everyone kind of stays indoors, it's not a great place to live. So at the same time Vin is on the streets, she gets picked up by this guy named Kelsier who kind of takes her under his wing, trains her up to be an apprentice, and he is leading a rebellion to overthrow the Dark One. So it takes that chosen one aspect and it subverts it by giving you a crew instead, and by a character who doesn't necessarily have a chosen destiny or prophecy to them, but brings them into the fold anyway and makes them become part of that rebellion process. So it does have that Dark One, it does have that villain. It is kind of similar to Wheel of Time and Harry Potter in that sense, as having that setup and villain and that magical world, but it also plays with the trope a little bit. So if you're a little bit confident with fantasy, or if you just want to try something a little bit different in general, I would say read The Final Empire, because Brandon Sanderson writes books that tend to build up towards a really sucker punch ending, and he definitely did that with The Final Empire and the books afterwards as well. So in the end, yes, I would say The Final Empire is worth it, because I do plan on rereading it as soon as possible, but also when I first read it I gave it a 4 stars as well as the Wheel of Time book 1. So it's interesting to look back and go, hang on, I thought I didn't love Wheel of Time, or hang on, I thought I loved The Final Empire. And I do really enjoy both, but I think The Final Empire really stands up to a reread, whereas Wheel of Time, to me personally, I've read it, I've done my dash, and it's not worth me personally rereading it, because I know that I really struggled with the pace. But when I go back to The Final Empire, I know that I'm gonna miss all of these gold nuggets of world building and little bits of foreshadowing that I didn't see the first time, because Brandon really builds up all of his world building and he feeds it to you gradually through usually a character learning it as well as the magic system. So if you're worried about larger concepts in a fantasy, and if you're worried about something that's a bit longer, you can treat The Final Empire like a standalone and it will work out fine. So those are all of the books that I wanted to talk about in this video. Let me know if you've read any, let me know if you've reread any, I would be really interested to know. But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down below and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.